You know, in the summer of '69, the whole peace and love thing was in full swing. But a string of unbelievably brutal murders just slammed the brakes on the entire decade. And the man behind it all? A charismatic, wannabe rock star and career criminal named Charles Manson. So today, we're going to dig into how this one guy built the so-called family and twisted them into committing some of the most notorious crimes you've ever heard of.
I mean, just listen to that. That's from the very first police officer to walk into the crime scene. The repetition in his voice. It was horrible. That tells you everything. This wasn't just a murder. This was something else entirely.
Okay, so let's go back. It's the morning of August 9th, 1969. The sun's coming up over Los Angeles, and in a secluded home up in the Hollywood Hills, a nightmare is discovered. And trust me, what they found there sent a shockwave of pure terror through the city.
There were 5 victims. The actress Sharon Tate, beautiful and successful, and 8.5 months pregnant. Just devastating. Her friends were there too, Jay Sebring, Abigail Folger, and Wojciech Frykowski. And then there was Stephen Parent, a kid who was just 18 years old, visiting the caretaker. He was just in the wrong place at the absolute worst time.
And then there was this. Scrawled on the front door, in the victim's own blood, was the word pig. It was so brutal, so random, so bizarre. It left everyone, from the police to the public, asking one single, terrifying question. Why?
To even begin to get the why, you have to understand the who. And the strangest part, the guy who ordered all this wasn't even there that night. His name was Charles Manson, and his journey from a forgotten kid to one of history's most infamous cult leaders is really the key to unlocking this whole horrifying story.
Manson's whole life was just a revolving door of institutions. He was literally born no-name Maddox to a teenage mother. By the time he was 9, he was already in reform school. His record, even as a kid, paints this picture of a deeply disturbed and violent person. This wasn't a sudden turn to evil. The pattern was there from the very beginning.
17. Just let that number sink in for a second. By the time he got out of prison in 1967, Charles Manson was 32 years old, and he had already spent 17 of those years, more than half his entire life, locked up.
And here's the craziest part. He actually begged them to let him stay in prison. Can you imagine? The outside world was totally foreign to him. Prison was the only real home he'd ever known. He had no idea how to function in society. But the real problem was, society had absolutely no idea how to handle him.
So where does Manson land in 1967? Right in the middle of San Francisco's summer of love. It was like a perfect storm. You have this guy with his intense eyes, a guitar, and a lifetime of learning how to manipulate people, dropped into a sea of thousands of young lost kids all looking for answers, all looking for a guru. And boy, did he have a system. It was like a 4-step plan. First, find kids who felt lost. Then, get them out of the city, isolate them on this rundown old movie ranch. Step 3 was to just systematically tear them down with a constant diet of LSD, group sex, and his own twisted sermons. And once they were broken, he'd rebuild them, with him at the center of their universe, as their savior. And this is what's so absolutely terrifying about this whole thing. The people who joined him, they weren't hardened criminals. We're talking about homecoming princesses, honor roll students, kids who sang in the church choir. These were kids from good middle-class families. He took completely ordinary people and somehow convinced them he was Jesus Christ, turning them into cold-blooded killers.
So that brings us back to the big question. Why the murders? What could possibly drive these kids to do something so horrible? Well, the answer is truly bizarre. It's all tied up in this crazy apocalyptic race war that Manson prophesied, and he named it after a song from his favorite band, the Beatles. Okay, so get this. Manson told his followers that helter-skelter, this race war, was coming any day. He preached that black people would rise up and wipe out the white establishment. His family's job was to just go hide in the desert and wait it out. Then, after the war, they'd emerge and take over, but Charlie got impatient. He decided the apocalypse needed a little push to get started. And suddenly those gruesome messages written in blood start to make a twisted kind of sense. The word pig, the word rise, they were designed to be false flags. He told his followers to leave these signs to make it look like the Black Panthers or other black militant groups did it, hoping it would ignite the race war he was so obsessed with.
So these murders throw the entire city into a full-blown panic. But for months, the police were completely stumped. The break in the case, when it finally came, would set the stage for one of the wildest, most sensational trials of the 20th century.
You know, the case wasn't cracked by some brilliant detective work. It was cracked by pure arrogance. One of the killers, Susan Atkins, got picked up on a totally different charge, and she just couldn't help but brag to her cellmate that she was the one who killed Sharon Tate. And that one stupid boast, that was the thread that unraveled everything.
In the end, Manson and his main followers were all found guilty and sentenced to death. But then, a couple years later, California temporarily got rid of the death penalty, so all their sentences were changed to life in prison. Manson died in prison back in 2017. Susan Atkins died there in 2009. Patricia Krenwinkel is still locked up. And just recently, in 2023, Leslie Van Houten was actually released on parole after more than 50 years.
But the impact of all this was so much bigger than just a trial. The Manson murders were like a cultural ground zero. The idea that this kind of evil could spring from the heart of the hippie movement just shattered an entire generation's sense of hope and safety. The summer of love was dead, and in its place came locked doors, alarm systems, and a fear that never really went away.
And that's really the question that the Manson story leaves us with, isn't it? It's the one that still haunts us. How does one person convince normal kids, homecoming queens, and honor students to commit acts of unbelievable violence? It's a question about how vulnerable we can be, how powerful manipulation is, and the terrifying darkness that can be hiding just beneath the surface. A question we're all still trying to figure out.